Welcome to Life After Corporate, your ultimate guide for making the leap from corporate leader to entrepreneur. I'm Deb Boulanger, entrepreneur, executive leader, and founder of the Launch Lab for Women Entrepreneurs. This is your time to break through the glass ceiling once and for all and get your ticket to the C-suite. Come back each week to get the leading strategies, advice, and tools that will give you the skills and confidence you need to replace your corporate paycheck. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome, everyone. It's Deb Boulanger here, and welcome to another episode of Life After Corporate. And if you're returning to us, welcome back. It's great to have you here again. And if you're with us for the first time, welcome home. Today, I am extremely excited to introduce you to someone who I consider the epitome of entrepreneurship. Today, you're going to meet Reverend Tisha Williams, who is the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Bridgehampton, New York. And she has a life after corporate story. And I'm super excited to have her share that story with you today. So welcome, Tisha.
Thank you so much, Deb. It is an honor to be here. I'm honored and humbled. I'm certainly glad to have been invited, and I can't believe I'm counted among some of the most dynamic and influential leaders that you have presented in the past on this podcast. So I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's so great to have you here. And I invited you because there's so much I notice in watching you lead your church. And there are so many parallels to entrepreneurship. And when we met, what was it? Last October.
Mm-hmm.
Is that all?
Yes, I know. It's been a lifetime.
We met last October at a retreat that was led by Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook. It was a mutual friend and someone we both admire. And I started talking about, I was a little bit concerned about adapting my talk about entrepreneurship to a group of women ministers. And the more I've gotten to know each of the women that I've met there, and you especially, I see so many parallels. And most of the people who are in ministry, including yourself, came from a different path. And I know I've heard drop here and there that you were once a model, that you worked in corporate, and now you're a minister of this church. Tell us a little bit about your story and what led you here.
So my story is very interesting. Whenever anyone asks me about my life, I always equate it to the opening scene of Forrest Gump. I don't know if you remember that scene, but he sits on a bus bench waiting for the bus, and there's a feather, and the feather is picked up by a breeze and begins to float everywhere. And the way the movie begins is the way it ends. The feather again somehow just lands very softly, and then Forrest picks it up again. That is kind of how I look at my life and my journey. I'm that feather that floated on a breeze and landed in some of the most amazing places, and I'm still being picked up again. Really, my story started, I think, when I was 14 years old. I adopted what I call my go for yours attitude. And it really was inspired by my brother. My brother was an A-type overachiever, scholar athlete, the whole bit. He came home from college, and it was summer break, and he saw me laying on the couch and quickly understood that that was my plan for the summer. And he was terribly irritated and told me that that is not what I could do for the whole summer. And so he went in the paper and found a local ad for a pageant and told me that that's what I was going to do. I was going to go, he was going to drive me to this audition, and I was going to be in this pageant. Well, lo and behold, the unthinkable happened. Not only did I make the call, but I ended up winning not only the local title, but the national title. And that's kind of where my whole go for yours attitude was born, that whenever a door was opened, that I was going to have the courage and the boldness to go for it. And in that just became a teen model, an actress, and then eventually wanted to start my own business, my own event planning business, and needed seed money. So I went to a media company, a major media company, and went to temp for 2 weeks. And 14 years later, built a career there. So again, here I am, this feather floating on a breeze. Somewhere in that time, going to church, being an avid churchgoer, committed to my church life, my church family, I began to feel a call, a pull toward ministry. And what's funny is I really thought that people were not going to take me seriously because I had done so many things in my life, from acting to modeling to sports to music, you name it. Because I had done so many things, I really denied my call to ministry because I thought people would say, oh, now she wants to be a preacher. Okay, we've done all these other, now she wants to preach the word of God. Okay. And that was really my fear. But if anyone has ever been called, or you understand what a calling on your life feels like, you know that you can run, but you cannot hide. Eventually, you are going to have to heed the call. And that's what happened to me. I heeded the call in ministry in 2008. I preached my trial sermon. I was ordained in 2008 as well, ordained in 2014. And then I came one day on a whim to a little church in Bridgehampton. And I literally came here just to visit. I felt like I needed a worship experience. I was preparing our home for a visit from my mother-in-law. And when I came here, they did not have a senior pastor. And I offered my services simply for Bible study because I understood and understand what a organization, even a church, is like without leadership. It's like herding cats. There are power struggles happening. I understand that's a very difficult place to be. And I could not, in my good conscience, be an able-bodied clergy person and not offer my services to a church in need. And I did. And lo and behold, they invited me to come preach on occasion. That happened on and off for about a year. And then they asked if I would consider throwing my hat in the ring for the role of senior pastor. And now here we are 2 years later, and I am the senior pastor of the First Baptist Church in Bridgehampton, the first female pastor in the 96-year history of the church. So,
wow, congratulations.
How's that for a feather floating on a breeze?
That is a great feather story. And there are so many parallels. And the reason why I think it's so important to hear your story today is that there's many paths that women follow on their way to entrepreneurship, being their own CEO or heading up an organization. And for many, and myself included, we're accidental entrepreneurs. This wasn't the original path that we chose, but like following that feather. I think when you're tuned in to the fact that you're here for a higher purpose. And I know for myself, I was like reading Gail Sheehy's Passages when I was 16 years old. Like, how was a 16-year-old tapping into the fact that women evolve and change over the decades, that you're more tuned in to feathers. You see them more. And I think there are always feathers there. It's whether or not you're tuned in to perceiving the messages that are all around you. And I love the fact that you went for a temp job and stayed for 14 years. That's a great...
No, isn't that something?
That was something, right? But we fall in love with the corporation. We fall in love with our corporate families. And in many ways, when you sort of come of age in adulthood in the corporate environment, it really feels like family. It's your work family. And so to make a brave move and take something on that is a calling that was tugging at your heart and wouldn't go away, and moving beyond that fear of, what will they think of me? You know, a lot of women have that same struggle of, I'm afraid to bust a move because
absolutely,
I'm going to be judged, right?
Absolutely. And what's so interesting about that is our male counterparts do not have that problem. A man will see an ad in the on Monster or Indeed and know they're not qualified and go for it anyway and say, whatever I need to learn, I'll learn on the job. And for some reason, we're so fearful to do that. And I think that's because we're often misunderstood. And I think it's just the story, the narrative that's been told about women for so long that keeps us from taking advantage of opportunities. And what I have found, though, is even when the opportunity is not given to us, we can't be afraid to create the opportunity. I read a quote that says, a wise woman will make more opportunities than she finds. And that's actually how Who's That Lady was born in my previous church. Who's That Lady is a women's ministry that I founded 5 years ago. And my former church that I was with before had a robust women's ministry. They were expert fundraisers, expert programmers, great at fellowship. But what I learned or saw was that there was no biblical or teaching component to the ministry. And I believe and have been taught that you can't keep people if you can't teach them. How you keep them is by teaching them. And so I literally went to my pastor and pitched this idea for a women's Bible study focusing on the lesser known women of the Bible. And that is how I created and developed the content for Who's That Lady? And now here we are 5 years later. It's grown into a national and international movement. There's over 1,000 women nationwide, another 500 in Kenya, another 300 in Uganda. We have an annual conference. We do a Love You 30-day challenge. And last year, we opened the Who's That Lady Academy for all children in Mwani, Kenya. And it services children who have been infected and affected by HIV and AIDS. And so all of this came because I saw a gap, as you so wonderfully explained. I love your teaching on filling gaps because I saw there was a void, there was a gap. And while we were, as women, doing all of this pouring out, which we have a tendency to do, we were not being poured back into. And so this ministry to inspire, to encourage, to give women a safe space to share was born because I could have waited forever for that opportunity and it may have never come.
Exactly. And what you're doing is helping women through Who's That Lady rewrite the narrative.
Yes.
And it's all about how you perceive yourself through the stories around you and the stories from the Bible, the stories that your family told you. And what we end up doing is carrying around a lot of legacy that just doesn't belong to us. And so a lot of the part of this journey is just letting stuff go and allowing for the truth to really emerge. And you know what? I just want to highlight you. Again, it just confirms to me why we're having this conversation, that you can find that gap, galvanize a community around an idea and pour into them. And so we talk about, you know, finding the gap in life after corporate. And soon we're going to be talking about, too, how do you craft the right language, the right content, and craft the right teaching? Because successful businesses start from a place of service, from a place of serving a community, filling a gap, finding that problem that no one else is really solving or no one is solving really well, and then creating a solution around that. So one of the things that I've noticed, because I'm an avid follower of your sermons, and now that we are in this season of COVID-19 and we're not gathering in person, one of the things I notice that you do exceptionally well is meet your membership exactly where they are. It's almost like you're a tuning fork and mind reader, that you're so tapped into what struggles they're experiencing. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, about how you tap into your audience and how you use the power of telling stories from the Bible to give people a path forward?
Sure. One of the things that's super important to me is, in as much as I think some people think we're supposed to disassociate our role as clergy and human being, we can't. When I look at Jesus, Jesus really is the model. Jesus was both human and divine. And when we look at our human condition, we cannot help but to look at the human condition of Jesus. We can't help it. And so for me, the model is how Jesus did it. That's what he did. Jesus had a wonderful way of meeting people exactly where they were. Not just meeting them, he met them where they were mentally by telling stories. You mentioned the power of story. Jesus spoke in parables. Jesus had a way of breaking down very complex idea into its most basic form so that people could understand. And I love that idea, and that my preaching is very much informed that way. At the end of the day, what I consider a successful sermon is if you can see what I said. If you can walk away seeing what I said, I feel like I may have done a decent job. The other thing that Jesus did is Jesus was very good at meeting people where they were emotionally. There are several stories of Jesus just kind of comforting people, being very compassionate, offering grace in situations where judgment was the protocol of the day. And Jesus gives grace. But you know what I love about Jesus too? He also met people where they were physically. He very rarely did ministry within the four walls of the confines of a building. He was by the water. He was at the well. He found opportunities to minister to people where they were even physically. And I've really tried to model my ministry after that. When I do things like I recently did the piece on grief, I do it in a way, how would I want to hear this? How would I want to receive this message? I wouldn't want anyone to browbeat me. I would want someone to help me to understand this. I'm a very visual and auditory sensory learner. And so I feel like that's the way I teach and why I meet people there, because I just want people to feel better about their situation than they do. No one needs help confirming feeling horrible. You already know you feel horrible. What people need is a lift. They need hope. They need to know that their situation can be better. For me, I say it's like a garden. You don't have to search for weeds in a garden. They are visible long before the flowers ever are. If you look around right now in our area, dandelions are everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's lots of weeds in my backyard.
Right. They're everywhere. And while you look at them and think, wow, they are very pretty, they're still weeds. They're still choking the life out of anything that's trying to push through ground. And so we don't have to look hard to find the negative. You have to dig sometimes to find the fruit or find the harvest. Is that right? Like you have to dig for a potato. You have to
Yeah.
pull up a
Yeah.
carrot. Sometimes we have to dig and work hard for the good things in life. And so my approach has always been, it's going to be okay. I very much, my theology is very much, I find God's grace in all things. That is very much my theology. And that's how Jesus did it. So when I think about why I want to meet people where they are, because I know where I am. I'm
Mm.
hurting in this COVID-19. So I try to preach to people what I would want someone to preach to me.
And it's all about building your bridge, right? So you build a bridge.
Absolutely.
You build a bridge for people for where they are to where they want to be. All good entrepreneurs do the same thing. They build a bridge from where you are to where you want to go, the desire that you have in your heart, the thing that you want to achieve, but you're struggling with and you can't get there. And you have done that with, I remember your series last season on being a bodybuilder, and you talked about, nutrition and what you're putting into your body. And it was when church was open, and you actually rolled up 2 carts, one full of junk food and one full of health food, and brought people to a choice of, what are you putting into your body? What are you putting into your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body? And then you did one on resistance and strength training. Last weekend, it was cleaning out the closet. What bad habits, what bad things are you holding on to? They're not bad things, but what habits are you holding on to that are really drawing you down? What do you need to clean out? And what I want to highlight is the reason why you're still preaching and the reason why you are building up an even bigger following. So Who's That Lady is a great story of how you found a need, you galvanized a community, you started filling that need, and how it just lights on fire and it just grows past continents. You did the same thing with technology. And what always impressed me when I walked into your church for the first time was like, oh my God, there's monitors up here, because I haven't been a churchgoer my entire life. I don't know all these songs. I don't know the words. And so it's so great to see things on the screen. And you were also using audio technology. You were reaching out via the telephone with recorded messages to your membership. And as soon as COVID-19 hit and we were social distancing, you brought church online. So tell me a little bit about, which is also very entrepreneurial, you pivoted immediately. So what led you to just jump on that technology train?
Well, when I came to the church, it was one of the things that we didn't have. And one of the things that I understood was that we needed it, that the way, the message doesn't change. How we deliver the message always has to. When Jesus came, again, that's what he did. He took the same message and taught it in a totally different way to reach the people that he needed to reach at the time. And in this age of technology, in this information age, we had to do the same thing. So one of my first goals when we came to the church was to get the monitors, because I understand that we live in a culture that lives their life by monitors. That's all our phones are. It's a portable monitor where we explore content, we find content, we watch content all day long. And so if we are going to compete, we have to have the same things in the church. We have to be relevant. So that was one of the first things that I really knew I needed to do. And I understood also how that works generationally. That while the seniors may be looking at me in the pulpit, children are looking at monitors. Millennials are looking at monitors. And as you said, seekers. This was all a part of also being seeker sensitive. As someone who you just said, I haven't been to church in a while, and to see that was refreshing. There are people who haven't been to church and we have to be seeker sensitive to their church experience. And so if it means having the lyrics on a screen so that they can immediately feel more comfortable, that's a great thing. And so when we come to the pivot, I like to call this a providential pivot, because all of these things were already in the works. From the digital giving, again, you mentioned the calls, the text messages, all of these things were in the works. And so when COVID-19 hit, we were already strategically placed in a position to hit the ground running. But I have to say that was a providential pivot. And here's why I say that, because I've learned that the secret to pivoting isn't that everything is going to be perfect or making every perfect decision on how we land, but it is about being confident in yourself and having faith in something bigger than yourself so that you can navigate when change hits unexpectedly. And the faith that I had was in God, not in us. And so when I came, just trying to be in tune with, where do we need to go? What is important for your people right now? And it was technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit, I was reluctant to put myself in front of the camera. Now, understand how powerful this is. This is someone who's been in front of the camera since she was 14 years old, but who struggled with being in front of the camera when it came to preaching the word of God. And so if I'm being honest, I was dragging my feet a little bit. And so I say this is a providential pivot because it's God that pushed us through COVID-19 to get to this place. But I'm grateful for having the obedience and the foresight to be willing to put everything in place so that when this did happen, we were ready. We were on the ball. And it has been so amazing to watch flourish and watch grow. We've seen an average of 1,000 views each week on YouTube through Bridge Nation. And so it's been really, really phenomenal. But the pivot was both strategic, but it was also providential. It speaks to a God that sees the big picture before you even know what it is.
And personal, because just like every other woman out there who's thinking about making the leap to entrepreneurship, or who just started, or who doesn't like the way she looks on video, or is reluctant to reach her audience. And right now, video is all we have to each other. So if you're feeling reluctant about getting on the screen, and you have a calling and you have something that you want to fulfill, a mission you want to fulfill in the world, you got to step beyond yourself. You have to trust something bigger than who you are to get you through it. And so
Can I speak to that a little bit, Deb?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to say that's what I learned along the way in this whole journey, that you kind of have to, as you say, get over yourself. I mentioned early on that I was very much hindered by public opinion, very fearful of it. Always had a fear of what others would think of me. And I still do, if I'm being honest, especially in this very public virtual space. I'm sure you can understand how that
Absolutely.
feels.
Yeah, I face it all the time.
I mean, the courage to launch a podcast the way that you have is just amazing. But public criticism has always been my Achilles heel. And that has begun to, I'm changing very much in that area because I began to do the work to focus on awareness of self. Self-awareness is key. I mean, the key is knowing who you are and owning every bit of it. It's about being your authentic self and showing up as your authentic self every single day. So I love Brene Brown, and I don't know if you've heard one of her talks, but she quotes Teddy Roosevelt. And she says, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena. And she says, I want to be in the arena. I want to be brave with my life. And when we make the choice to dare greatly, we sign up to get our quote unquote, I'm paraphrasing, butts kicked. We can choose courage or we can choose comfort, but we can't have both, not at the same time. And so what I've learned for sure, Deb, throughout this journey and throughout my whole life journey is that what I've learned about myself is I've never been afraid to get into the arena. even when I am afraid, I do it afraid. I've never been afraid to go into the fight, to go into the arena, to be a gladiator. And there are absolutely days, seasons, months where I get my behind kicked. But here's what I've learned through this process. There are also days where I'm the one doing the kicking. And that makes all the difference in the world for me. And so if there is anyone who is struggling just with this idea of public opinion, I just want to encourage them to let it go. Just show up every day. Show up every day.
Just show up. I used to have a Post-it note above my desk that said, how much do you really want it?
Right.
And that was my inspiration to move through the fear. And, something changed my life. So I have a quote, and it comes from Richard Feynman, who is a Nobel Prize winning physicist who's no longer with us on this earth, who solved the shuttle D-ring problem back in the days when we had the Space Shuttle Challenger blow up. And I read one of his books, and it was titled, What Do You Care What Other People Think? And that book changed my life. And he, like you, like the stories you cite from the Bible, had a very plain-spoken way of breaking down physics into everyday experiences. And so I think that, what do you care what other people think, became my motto. And I have stretched myself because I'm shy. I'm an introvert, It's not always comfortable being out there in front. But if you don't lead, who will?
Absolutely.
So what I'd like to ask you, before we close is, you've created this, you've used this technology, you've pivoted, you've created #BridgeNation. So I think everything you do is brilliant.
Thank you.
But what has been your learning in this process, aside from the learning that you've just shared about yourself and getting out of your own way and moving through the discomfort and making it happen as, let's just say, the CEO of Bridge Nation, what is working, and what is your vision going forward? What happens after post-COVID when we're back, when church doors are open again? What happens with what you've built already?
So we've already begun to have that conversation. We've noticed that there are parts of this that are really working, even beyond how they were working when we were together in a more traditional setting. And so one of the things that we are absolutely going to continue with is virtual worship, because now we do have Bridge Nation. And what we are working on is having Bridge Nation be just as a part of our physical church as the actual church. I can say that better. So what I want to do is mirror everything that we do in our actual church setting, mirror it for Bridge Nation. So that people, while they are virtual members and they are distance members, they're just part of a new campus. So all that's happened over these last few weeks is I've become a multi-campus pastor. That's all that's happened. We just have another site now, and it's in the virtual space. And so what we're going to do is create a offering where people can join our church virtually, where they can participate in communion, where they can be givers and partner with us financially with the church. We want them to have the full First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton experience. And because they're not in the building doesn't mean that they cannot experience it. So that's one of the things. And we're also looking at not quite leaving this virtual worship behind. I'm seriously considering a few times a year for us to have Cyber Sundays, where we continue to stay home and take a break. I don't think in our area anybody will object that first summer we decide to do that maybe once in a while. If you can have church on the beach, I don't think anyone's going to object to that. But really trying to look to ideas, because I think in as much, again, God's grace in all things, that while this has been horrible, it has been very difficult, it's been tremendous to navigate, there are some great things that have come out of this. And one of the things I think that I've learned in this post-COVID-19 world, what this has taught me, I've learned that creativity and imagination are key. That the limits to what can be accomplished in life, business, entrepreneurship, even in our spiritual lives is limitless, really. Because if these past few weeks has taught us anything, it's what can be done with just a little faith, creativity, and imagination. Families have come together in ways like they never have because of technology, because of creativity, because of imagination. So there's a scene, I'm a huge movie buff, in the film The Matrix. And it's the scene where Neo is taken, the lead character, Keanu Reeves, is taken to the Oracle to learn about his future. And while they're waiting in the waiting room, there are all of these children and people with special gifts. And he sees this little boy who is telekinetically bending a spoon with his mind. And he offers Neo a try. And when Neo tries, he fails. And the boy says this to him: "Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only realize the truth. There is no spoon. Then you'll see it's not the spoon that bends. It is only yourself." So to every leader, every clergy person, every entrepreneur, what I believe is happening right now and post-COVID is that we're being called to bend our spoons. The spoon doesn't even exist. We are called to bend ourselves because our future depends on it. I think that's where we are and what I have learned. There is no spoon. It doesn't exist. It's only us bending ourselves. And the question we have to ask ourselves in this season is, how far are we willing to bend?
How far are we willing to bend? That's so perfect that I'm going to leave it there, that creativity and imagination is key, and creativity, imagination, and fear can exist at the same time. So it's time to learn how to bend, get out of our own way, do what needs to be done. And thank you for the lessons, Tisha. It was such a pleasure to have you on Life After Corporate. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you and to follow you and benefit from your wisdom. So thank you so much.
Thank you. The pleasure has been mine. The honor and pleasure has been mine. It's been just amazing to get to know you, to learn about you. I'm super excited anytime I get to hear you speak and teach. And I wish you all of the best with Life Beyond Corporate.
Thank you so much. And that's it for today, my friend. This wraps up another episode of Life After Corporate. I look forward to hearing from you again. Take care. Thanks for listening, my friend. If you enjoyed this show, please head over to iTunes and subscribe and leave us a review. And be sure to hop over to the Life After Corporate Facebook group and join other growing entrepreneurs to get weekly tips on how to create more money and meaning doing work you love.